How to be happy in a world of comparison. Have you ever felt worse scrolling through social media, even though nothing in your life actually changed? We live in a world where more than 5 billion people are on social media. That's over 60% of the planet. And the average person spends 2 to 2.5 hours a day scrolling on social media. Just think about that for a second. Think about where you are now and think about what has taken place in your life in the last 2.5 hours. And over that period of time, that is the amount of daily time expenditure, and you might say wastage, on social media. Over 5 billion people. Let's reflect on that for a second. So it's no wonder that comparison has become quite common and is quite a hum in the back of our minds that is always there and always whispering. So why do we compare? There's some interesting research on this. This goes back to psychologists, in particular Leon Festinger, who came across the social comparison theory in 1954. So comparison is quite simply biological, and it has good reason to be, and it serves quite a few benefits, at least in the beginning stages of our life. We evolved to measure ourselves within social groups to understand status, belonging, and safety. As children, it's even necessary. We compare ourselves to other people to learn, to find our place in society, and to develop competence. And it's an integral part of how we orient ourselves in society's hierarchy. As it happens, there are two forms of comparison: upward comparison and downward comparison. Upward is when we're comparing ourselves to people that we think are better off than us, and downward comparison is thinking and looking at people that we think are worse off. Both distort reality, and both can quietly chip away at our happiness. Although, since the advent of social media, it seems to me that the upward comparison is the major culprit in terms of comparing ourselves to other people and destructing our happiness. So the modern trap. Today, our ancient wiring is under threat and hijacked by technology, at least our willingness to let it be such, because social media is such a powerful tool and can be used for such constructive and positive measures. But if we allow it to, it can become something that is quite destructive to our self-esteem, and to our happiness, and to our productivity. Social media shows us a selective reality. That's the best 5 seconds of everybody else's lives. We're comparing our behind-the-scenes footage with other people's highlight reels. This is something that I first came across in Mark Manson's work. And every time that we scroll, every time that we get that hit of dopamine, we chase likes, validation, attention, and yet we end up feeling smaller and more insignificant. Even real achievements can seem and feel insignificant when we constantly measure up against somebody else's success. So there is a cost to comparison. Comparison feels like motivation. It feels like you are striving and being ambitious, until it quietly starts stealing your happiness. It dulls gratitude. It fuels self-doubt. And it pulls you off your own path, chasing goals that were perhaps never meant for you. Studies show that people who compare themselves often report lower life satisfaction and higher rates of depression. There's two critical pieces of modern day work that I'd like to draw your attention to. The first one is from Jordan B. Peterson, in referencing his book, 12 Rules for Life. He has a chapter in that book called Compare Yourself to Who You Were Yesterday, Not to Who Somebody Else Is Today. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who somebody else is today. Because there will always be somebody richer, smarter, stronger, or luckier than you. And if your happiness is dependent on outpacing everybody else, you'll never stop running. There's another wonderful story in Mark Manson's book, the second piece of modern day literature that I'd like to bring your attention to. In his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, he shares a story about Dave Mustaine, who was a guitarist who got kicked out of the band Metallica right before they became one of the biggest bands in history. Devastated, he poured that pain into starting a band called Megadeth. And he sold more than 25 million albums, toured the world, and became a rock legend. By every measure, he'd made it. But Mustaine still felt like a failure because he kept comparing himself to Metallica. He measured his worth by the one thing that he hadn't beaten. That is quite something. Now contrast this with Pete Best, who was the original drummer of the Beatles. He was fired just before the band's fame exploded. Years later, Pete said that being fired from the Beatles was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He built a peaceful life, raised a family, and found contentment because his definition of success was his own. That's the difference between comparison and contentment. One will keep you chasing somebody else's dream, and the other keeps you building your own. Peterson's advice in his chapter is not about ignoring ambition and ignoring comparing yourself. It's about choosing better metrics. Because happiness doesn't come from being the best, it comes from becoming better. So comparison should, by his reasoning, be inward and comparing yourself to who you were yesterday versus being externally focused and outward comparing yourself to other people. So he's not suggesting that one should not compare. He's suggesting what you should compare it to, which is yourself. Maybe the goal isn't to win against others. Maybe it's to win against who you used to be. So let's shift from comparison to inspiration. The goal isn't to erase comparison, it's to redirect it inward. Reframe it as information, not judgment. Ask yourself, what does this show me about what I value? When you come across a post that you might feel envious of or find yourself comparing yourself to that particular post and or person. Use other people's success as a mirror, not as a measuring stick. Replace envy with curiosity. So, for example, what can I learn from this? What is this person doing that I could perhaps learn from and apply in my own life? You could even keep a progress and a gratitude log of drawing your attention on a daily basis back to things that you do have and that you are grateful for. And one of the most important things, James Clear said it in a recent Threads post, you should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than your current results. And that speaks to Jordan Peterson's compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who anybody else is today. Being inwardly focused in our senses of comparison. And if you are better off yesterday than you were the day before that, and if you're better off today than you were yesterday, and you extrapolate that out over a month, a year, a decade, then you are applying focus to your trajectory, not to your current results. We overestimate what we can achieve in a year, and we underestimate what we can achieve in 10. And that is the compounding effect of an ever improving and increasing trajectory. So, what are practical tools? The important thing here, in my opinion at least, is to define what success means to you. This is fundamental, and this is the starting block of perhaps anything that you should ever choose to do and undertake, is to define success for you. Because if you don't define what success means to you, you will then play by somebody else's definition. And that is a losing battle. Try to curate your digital space. So unfollow accounts that drain your peace, if you find yourself being unable to not compare yourself to other people and particular handles, etc., profiles, then take a break from them, unfollow them. You can come back to it at a later stage. Practice temporal comparison. What does that mean? Compare yourself to who you were a year ago. It's reiteration and an expansion of Jordan Peterson's chapter 4 in his book. Anchor yourself in mindfulness, so journaling, reflection, stillness. That is a crucial part of any mental well-being journey. And that's rooted in what I alluded to in a previous episode about forest bathing, which I can attach the link in the show notes. Reconnect with your intrinsic goals. Focus on the process, not just the outcome, which ties in beautifully with following and paying attention to your trajectory and not your outcome. In short, when you stop measuring your life by somebody else's ruler, you finally start living your own story. And maybe that's what happiness really is. Not by being ahead, but by being aligned. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this episode, then please, one thing that you can do is you can share it with somebody that you know who you think would enjoy this too. There's lots of effort that goes into the show. This is free content that you can perhaps enjoy and learn and grow from. And the only thing I ask in return is if you can spread that word to other like-minded people. Hey everyone, a huge amount of work and effort goes into producing this podcast, whether it's from the research going into the episode, whether it's finding the guests coming to the location or them being online, to producing the content, edited and putting it in a format that is conducive to your ears and your eyes. And it goes a really, really long way if you can just do me one thing in return for this free content: share it. Share it far and wide, and if you find an episode useful, send it to someone who might feel the same way. That's all. Thanks a million. See you next week.